Well, welcome everyone again to our Lunchtime Learning with Dr. Juanita Simmons and MJJA's stopRED. If you will be requesting CLE credit, I will put the course code in the chat. It's 782547. Please put your Missouri bar number in the chat or email it to me after the session for our reporting requirements because I forgot to put it in with the registration. Feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation by use of the chat or taking yourself off mute. But please do mute yourself unless you are speaking, so out of respect for the speaker. Please take the survey at the end of the session. It's vital for our grant funding and helps us improve these sessions. The recording, along with other past sessions, will be available on stopred.org. I want to take the time to thank our funding source. Funds are made available for this project through the Missouri Department of Public Safety and the Missouri Juvenile Justice Advisory Group from funding provided by the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. Dr. Simmons, take it away.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Liz. Welcome to a new year with MJJA Red Lunchtime. We're so excited today for our presenter, Lydia Lopez. We want to also say on behalf of our MJJA staff, we welcome you and we're grateful that you have come to share a new year with us. We have with us today Jeff Barlow, our executive director. Give us a wave, Jeff. So many who may not have met you now. Thanks for being here, Jeff Barlow, our executive director, and staff members of MJJA. Special thanks to Liz for arranging for today's much-needed topic. The topic, of course, is Behind the Fear: Supporting Immigrant Families in an Age of Uncertainty. And here to present from a lived experience perspective, and one who was a teen immigrant from Mexico to America, and who earned a psychology degree from Missouri Southern State University, and has dedicated her knowledge and her experience to bilingual, bicultural initiatives, managing and serving. Please review her outstanding background. It is stellar. We love to see the type of involvement that she's given to our community, both in Kansas and Missouri, with the state initiatives, board services. All of that points to advocacy for migrant families and their children. We respect and honor and present to you Nidia Lopez.
Oh, wow. Dr. Simmons, thank you for such a beautiful introduction. I want to thank you guys for continuing to give me the opportunity to have some real conversations around a topic that we are all, well, in some way or another, connected to. So I do want to welcome you and acknowledge the real emotionally demanding work that we all do with youth and families. So I do want to set a real expectation that this is not a legal training. This is about fear and trauma and how systems are experienced. So we do want to acknowledge that immigrant fear, that it impacts families involved in the juvenile court, probation, child welfare, which is my current space. I do workforce development in Kansas and in schools. So we know that families are experiencing this, and so this is why I continue to come back and hopefully begin with a listening for understanding. Next slide. All right, so I just want to quickly go over our objectives today. So our objective is to understand that immigration fear exists even in families that never disclose their status. That the behavior is often shaped by fear, not defiance. So I invite you to think about behaviors that you've seen that are rooted in fear rather than resistance. So we do need to normalize this discomfort and uncertainty for the families and also for ourselves, right? We are in times feeling a lot of stress for the people that we serve. So I also invite you to take a moment to think about like when families seem withdrawn, hesitant, or disengaged. I want you to understand that this is a learning space. So this is really not a debate. We're not here to debate. We're here to use reflection and keeping ourselves focused on that practice and impact. Um, so it's really just listening for understanding and not necessarily agreement. So I want to, yeah, again, I just want to emphasize how you may already be working with the family who is experiencing a lot of stress and not really knowing the level of stress because we know that you may be working with a kiddo who, was born, raised here, right? But they are a part of what we would call a mixed status family, which means, so a mixed status is that, dad or mom or both, or someone they live with, that was deported or, isn't going to work because of the fear of being deported I have an uncle who is like not working right now because he doesn't want to be deported. Um, so if we go to the next slide, please. So I'm not going to spend too much time with sort of the landscape of the U.S. immigration. It's very complicated. It's layered. Something to consider here is that uh, like so someone's immigration status is like a spectrum. It's not a binary. Some folks came in asking for asylum. Some of those applications are being now, retracted, or some people were on what we would call temporary protective status, TPS, and then that country now isn't protected. So there's so many, right? There's the undocumented folks. There's again the asylum seekers. There's also a big chunk of our kiddos who are now adults who will fall under DACA. Um, just to give you a quick, last week I had a former client. Her two her two kids are DACA. She's undocumented, and their application has to be renewed every 2 years. And she was calling me in a panic because so her kids, their work permit is expiring one this month and one next month. They did all the paperwork and turned in the documents to renew and the fee, which is, I believe right now is $400 to $500. And she hasn't heard from them. And so she is, as you can imagine, as a mama, very worried about, oh my gosh, they're gonna have to quit their job, or like, what if they don't get the paperwork? What are we gonna do? And because now there's a record, so could they come to my house and pick my kids? And so those just one example of many situations that are going on with our families, and something to have in our minds is that we are here because we haven't done an immigration reform in 40 years. So that President Ronald Reagan was the one who provided us with some real immigration reform, and that's as old as I am. So, so we are due. We are due for some policy, but that's probably another another conversation. So we go to the next slide. So I do want to also briefly touch on what is happening now. So the sort of key deportation trends. So um, as we know, like the disconnect feels fear, right? Because families cannot predict who is at risk. So what is happening currently is, so this is from DHS. I pulled their stats this weekend. So we and other organizations are reporting this, like the Institute, are reporting that out of all of those folks who are being sent to a detention center, um, we're seeing that about 75% of these folks have no criminal conviction. So this creates, again, where families can't, predict what is really going to happen. So what we're seeing here is that the enforcement feels very random and pervasive rather than targeted. So for families, the takeaway is not like the policy nuance, it's more like just a real uncertainty. And when you talk to, legal scholars, they describe the current deportation efforts as more sensationalized, more intrusive. They're focused on sort of the low-hanging fruit rather than the serious threat. Um, and, when you look at all the overall numbers, um, one, we should remember that these are real people. And even though, we in some spaces they think that these are lower numbers than promised, but it's about the visibility and the intensity of the matter. So when you see, these sort of high profile raids and the media coverage and the sort of word of, word of mouth experiences that amplify um, that fear far beyond those directly impacted. So that's where I encourage you to um, really learn what is really happening, build that rapport with the families, because you may not know. Um, so again, something that we want to emphasize here is that in social media and and in media coverage, what we're seeing is a lot of folks who look like me, who are being, targeted. But we should know, as data shows, is that, undocumented folks that come in every skin from every country. So someone who's undocumented could be Irish, Canadian, Russian, Danish. I mean, it's folks with like blue-eyed blonde hair. It's just that right now, what we are seeing is a real racial disparity in that enforcement. And so families often feel that any interaction with any system could carry risk, right? So any of us who's showing up with a badge in a clipboard and a form, we are interacting with everything that's happening. Next slide. So we want to talk about these theories that guide our practice, right? We're all familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, which we know that when safety is threatened, compliance and long-term planning are just kind of unrealistic, right? If a family is experiencing that kind of level of unsafe, this is where and we'll talk about in the next slide, but this is where you start seeing, kiddos not going to school. And then that's like a domino
No, I
effect.
don't.
The domino effect is that, okay, well, now someone is going to have to be involved in bringing the family to court about the child not going. We also know that the trauma theory is that immigration fear is chronic. It's not a one-time event. So this is really important for us to understand. So, for example, I have aunts who live in Denver who have been here for 25 years. They're undocumented. And this has been an ongoing journey for them and their children and their community. And so it's it's systemic and it's chronic. That's what it is. And it isn't a one-time thing. I think it's important. I always emphasize with folks, becoming documented isn't like when you need food and you go and apply for food stamps, or hey, your driver's license is about to expire and you need to go and renew it, right? Or you can't afford rent, so you go to find an agency that can help you for a voucher, right? Um, this is another another system that is very dysfunctional and it's very complicated. And the fact of the matter is that most people simply don't qualify because we haven't done anything for 40 years. We also need to understand that family systems theory, right? Where children, we see it. I know you've seen it, I've seen it, where children become the translator, the advocate, the one that is like playing the adult, right? Or and to understand like the emotional support that it takes that that I'm thinking about like my parents' fourth grade education and sixth grade education, and obviously at some point surpassed them in education and how we carry that as immigrant kids, you know. Um, like guiding my parents through what to do with your 401k, just examples like that. We also want to talk about like the cultural humility. So this is about openness and respect and not mastering the mastery of every culture. Action could be seen, an action that is seen bad, and we know this, right? An action that can be seen bad by one culture, it might be the norm in another culture. So cultural sensitivity is key. I sometimes, when I was in migrant ed, uh, a colleague of mine would say, I went to the house and like the mom told me that she couldn't sign the form, and then I'll have to go make another, house visit. And it's very frustrating. He's like, why? And I'm like, they said the dad had to be the one to sign. And I'm like, yeah, because culturally, the male is the head of the household. And that in our culture, in our Latino culture, that's the norm. Um, excuse me. So we just want to focus on the fact that what looks like resistance is often just self-protection. Next slide, please. So we want to talk about recognizing fear and barriers. So so here's something that we must acknowledge, like immigration fear becomes fear of all authority. So when a family is in fear of deportation or detention, again, they're going to be scared. Um, you know, you'll see avoidance behaviors like missed appointments. There are going to be limited disclosures. You might feel, annoyed and irritated and like, why can't they just give me this information? Well, they're experiencing real fear. Um, they might also, another thing that shows up is that hesitation to seek help. You might have a resource and you'll be like, yeah, go to this, go to this place. I've experienced where, I knew that a migrant family needed food, and I sent them to this church. And this church was one that did ask for a social security number. And that's on me because I didn't do the research. And the family was like, oh, yeah, so we got there and they asked for a social security number. And I was like, oh, what? Well, most of them don't, but they're like, yeah, but this one does, so make sure you're aware of as you're referring, making referrals to really maybe dig a little deeper and ask some of those questions. Because, imagine, asking for help and then boom, oh, well, we don't have those, we don't have a social security number. Um, and think about like how this directly connects with the juvenile, um, the juvenile justice engagement challenges. Um, just the fact that someone has, a certain badge that looks kind of like the badge that is being flagged, shown by ICE, it creates a certain kind of, if you are one of those staff members, um, I always tell people, um, when you show up, really think about how some of those nonverbal things are showing up for others. How are they interpreting? Um, other ways that we can recognize fear in people is just like silence. No one's saying anything. Avoidance, limited eye contact. Culturally, we as um, you know, our eye contact is just not taught. It's actually we're taught that if you look down, that is shown that's a sign of respect. Um, you'll see reluctance in signing paperwork. And I get asked this a lot about language barriers. And all the technology that is out there for us to use when we are talking to someone. And my advice is, if you can, uh, bring a real person to do the translation. Uh, Ideally, someone that looks like me, someone that is bicultural, somebody that can, that can understand what's happening with the family. But if nothing else, so I get asked this a lot, like, well, what if we don't have anyone who speaks Spanish, and what if all these other things? Um, I suggest, I always suggest to enter when it's trying to establish trust is always start with the bare minimum. And people will say, "Oh, should I try to practice my Spanish from high school?" I'm like, "Yes, you should." Because we are going to be delighted that one, it might sound kind of funny. Don't take it personal. Two, and because I say funny things when I speak English, so also like there's a connection there. You are building, you are reaching for connection, and we will see it as that. Um, another great thing, say you walk into a house and or you get a sense of a scent of food. Food is so important and central to the way that we build community, the way that we show love, the way that we show up for others. So inquire about that. What's in the, what are you guys cooking? It smells good. Say that even if it doesn't, it doesn't hurt. And just understand that in times like these, even little things can go a really long ways. I also emphasize when we're trying to make a connection with a young person, I said this in the in-person um, presentation that I did. I was like, you know what we're really excited about? If you're talking to a young person, you know what we're really excited about despite everything that's going on? It's the Super Bowl because those young people know who's going to be at the Super Bowl, and so should you. If you have young folks who are Spanish speakers. So we want to normalize being our like normalize you being vulnerable. Like, I don't know, so teach me. And again, you're trying to build that trust. So I kind of went into Liz, if we could go to the next slide. So I kind of went into my next slide. But let's continue to talk about strategies for engagement. We talked about kind of building a rapport through language and nonverbal cues. Um, a thing that the level of uncertainty that we are experiencing, again, little things like knowing where the like Latino stores are, knowing where the food trucks are. Why? Because you're connecting to the community through a vein of things that are important to us. Um, if you are trying to build a rapport with a young person, again, stop at the store and grab one of those, mixed candy bags and bring it with you. Try to, it's it's just important to do those things that might seem insignificant, I guess is my point. When we talk about like connecting through like cultural brokers, right? And trusted community organizations. Um, Make sure you understand that so like the majority of Latinos are Catholic, but the more you move towards South America, folks are actually evangelical Christians. And that happened through many, many mission trips by American missionaries in the 80s. And so a lot of those folks from Guatemala, El Salvador are evangelical Christians, but find out where they practice their faith and make connections through there. I think now more than ever, I would really utilize these folks because um, that is where people are going um, almost as a sanctuary, and we're seeing publicly a lot of clergy getting involved in um, being vocal about what is happening to the communities. So definitely connect with those folks because our community really holds those people, the father, the priest, the head of that, church, a pastor, in high regard. Um, I, in terms of like when you're trying to build that relationship, make sure you explain your role and your purpose really well, and that you are transparent about like confidentiality and your limits. And obviously we want to be careful about like not over promising, right? There are certain things that or we just can't overpromise, but we want to be, um, yeah, we want to be engaging in a way that our tone, our body language, and we're explaining what we're there to do, and and I think you'll see that some of these I want to emphasize that consistency and predictability are safety tools. So the way you show up consistently will definitely, yeah, will definitely build safety over time. You know, some families may be hesitant right away to give you that, and I think don't take it personal. Try to see it from that perspective of where they're sitting. Um, some people might show that fear. Think about like the last time you felt fear. Did you make the best decisions? How did you react when you were scared? Um, so some families, yeah, might not want to talk. Some families going to take some time, and some families might just be, I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but like pissed off. And so we must be able to, like still stick to building trust with the people we're trying to, you know, we're trying to help. All right. Next slide. Okay, so at this point, I have talked for clearly a long time. So I want to be able to give you the opportunity to, we have 3 examples that we want to kind of try to identify fear factors and talk about the power dynamics. Also kind of explore cultural responsive solutions. And we have a lot of folks on the Zoom, which is great. But Liz is going to share the document, and I'll also share it on chat so that before you guys leave, you'll have that. And I encourage you to talk it through with your colleagues, the people you work with. Okay, so here's how this is going to work. I'd like for you to take a look at scenario 1, and let's have you come off mute and give us your expertise, your thoughts on our discussion questions. So I'll give you a minute to take a look at the scenario, and then we want to hear from you.
So I'm actually a juvenile officer here in the court system. Um, and I mean, I've actually encountered not on one of my juvenile cases, but just a member of the public who was here trying to find information for her friend's court case, and he was afraid to come to court because he was afraid that he was going to be taken into custody uh, and then deported if he showed up to court. So I think that that's a real fear, especially with everything going on in the media and our society today.
Right, the climate is pretty, yeah, is I mean, we're being driven by fear. Anybody else? How could we re-engage the family without like escalating that fear or risk disengagement?
I think it goes back to where you said clarifying what our positions are, letting them know that we're not here, well, A, finding out what they are afraid of, making that connection, and then letting them know that's not what our job is here for. We're not here to deport them. We're not here to expose them or try to, we're just here for, I guess for me, like we're CASA. So if we're advocating for the youth, we would keep that focus on the positivity that we're here to advocate for the youth. But like you said, make it very clear that we aren't trying to do the family any harm at all.
Right, right. And I do want to ask that last one, what assumptions should be avoided when documenting or reporting missed appointments?
That they don't take the appointment seriously, or don't think it's important, or because that's probably not the case. There's
Yeah,
probably lots of mitigating factors that are playing into it versus them just not wanting to be bothered or not wanting to come.
right, right.
Yeah, I would say avoid all assumptions, like you said, and just have a direct conversation with them.
Yes, Danielle, that is spot on. Like, um, I always tell folks what you are seeing as behavior, there's a lot going on behind that behavior. There's a lot of things driving that family and that kid to behave that way. And so when we are in the scenario that we are, so I want to tell you that I have been paying attention to immigration policy, for like 25 years, I would say. And I've never seen it this bad. I just haven't. Um, so um, so this is, I want to emphasize that like it's new, but it's been going on for a long time. So if you remember when I was talking about that chronic, it is, like it's been going on for a long time. And where we are right now, as I said before in my in-person presentation, is someone decided to light the match. That's what it feels like. That it was like, okay, let's just see where the chips fall, where the chips fall. And unfortunately, these are going to have some real consequences long after this is over. And we are going to see it play in our fields, in our spaces. Um, and and so that's a reality, right? These what we are experiencing, what we have been experiencing in the last year, will have a ripple effect
And I was
in
just going to chime in, just listening to this and going over the fear, why it's definitely real with me. I have a friend who lives in Texas. She's Black and her father's kids are Latino. They're all citizens,
Mhm.
but just their sheer appearance. She's in fear just when they go to the mall. She's in fear just when they go to the grocery store.
Uh-huh.
I have nephews that are half Black and half white, but they appear
Mhm.
to be from someone who doesn't know them, Latino or of some descent. And they talk about just that fear that someone's going to mistake them and just assume, make those same assumptions. And now they're in trouble. So like you said, even not just with the Latino community, but just people of color, period, are just living in that fear to do everyday daily things.
Yes.
So that's why I say, even with the assumptions, you may have a family that one may not consider under this umbrella, and
Mhm.
they could too also be missing appointments because they have that same fear exist with them.
100%. So what you're bringing in is something that um, last year the Supreme Court did make a decision that in what the way to interpret in simple ways is basically if you have an accent, if you look a certain way, that they are able to ask you. Whereas before it was sort of like a no-no, right? And so when
Mhm.
you have the Supreme Court making those kind of decisions, and that's where I go back to my comment about someone decided to light the match. right? And here we are, and we are in this position. And so my hope is that those of us who have been in these spaces, that we become more aware. These are not new conversations. These are definitely not new conversations. It's just heightened.
There was also, if I may, there's a
Mhm.
comment in the chat from Kaylin that says, I think being honest about how the policies that govern our work might impact a client's safety. We may have good intentions, but those are often not sufficient to interrupt the inequitable system.
Yeah, right. Good intentions, but often are often not sufficient. That's right. That's right. I think let's try the second one. And I'll give you a minute to look at it and then come off mute if you would. Has anyone encountered this, with a caregiver involved?
Well, I would like to add something. This is Teresa Ramsey.
Yes.
Yes. A lot of times when we have people from another nationality, sometimes getting a interpreter
Mhm.
kind of ease the the trauma or calm the client down. And
Uh-huh.
sometimes just knowing that if you can have that translator to translate, the importance of how um these documents won't do no harm to them, that we just need to sign because you're the legal guardian, yada yada yada.
Uh-huh.
Times that I've noticed that has helped in the past, because me just having English being my only and primary language, and me trying to explain, that can make a person frustrated and hesitant not to follow through. So a lot of times, if you get that person who can speak the language and they can just be, a person who can really explain it a little bit more thoroughly, that may give some leeway of trying to get them to cooperate.
That's right. So, Teresa, I want to thank you for bringing that into our conversation, because what I, to take that just a little further, when it comes to documentation, I have been in many, many spaces in which a family, I show up at the family's home, and they are handing me a form or a paper that they got in the mail from some agency that's in Spanish. And you might be like, wait, well, why do they want you to, it's in Spanish. And I'm like, well, okay, so here's where we need to talk about documentation and forms and things like that. That when you have, like, say you're using Google to translate, or you're using some kind of other, device, is that that is on the language skill that you would need to understand that language is really high, like almost college level, So we need to be really careful when we are utilizing just quick putting it in, uploading the document and then, oh, so easy. Oh, what I do is, um, like I will use a Google Translate if I'm running, low on time, but what I do is I look at it and then I make about 60% of edits where like I put in different words. But that's because I'm bilingual, and bicultural. Other times, I will send it to my parents. I'll say, do you guys, can you understand what this is? And if they're like, no idea. Okay, well, we got to redo this thing. So it's really important as we're navigating all of this, that we do, run it by someone, who, think about who your audience is and what the level, and in no means am I saying that, our immigrant families that we serve are all uneducated, because actually that's not true. You might see someone working, my parents worked at Tyson's Foods in Monette, um, and they were working alongside people who were teachers in their country, who had studied medicine, who had gone to some kind of, an electrician, a welder. I mean, it's just different people migrate for different reasons. All right.
There is another. Do you want me to read
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
chat?
Uh-huh.
So Jeff asked if most officers have ready access to interpreter services such as AT&T Language Line, etc. So if you all want to answer him in the chat. And then Madison said, I think understanding your own forms really well, taking time to explain them in basic terms, and providing blank copies of the forms beforehand could all be helpful. I think
Mhm.
also explaining what they can opt out of any demographic. It popped up. Hold on. Somebody else posted any out of any demographic information is also important. I had a client who heard this. And then Tara says, when people don't know how to enforcement priorities actually work or whether local agencies might share information with federal immigration authorities, it creates a lot of fears. Studies from healthcare settings show a similar pattern. When policies are unclear or people worry about enforcement, they're most likely to avoid services or hold back information. It's not because they don't need help, but because they're worried that what they share could end up being used against them or the family. When people think local agencies might be working with federal immigration enforcement, they pull, oh, yeah, less likely to talk about crimes, talk to police, take part in government programs, or trust public institutions at all.
Correct. Correct. Something that is, that's happening currently that is very traumatic for people is when, in past experiences, when folks used to show up to an immigration, appointment with a judge, to renew a work permit or to renew their status or whatever. Um, ICE would not be there. That was just sort of not done. And I think something that is, yeah, I mean, it's very scary and traumatic for, well, as we watch, people getting when when they're showing up to court and then they're being picked up, after their court. So you can see how all of this plays out in our homes, with our clients, with the very people that we don't mean them harm, but, all of this can compile. And when we think about, how this is really, affecting the mental health of people, not just the youth and not just the people that we're trying to help that are our clients, but like their mom and dad, whoever else is living with them, right?
We did have a
Uh,
question that I think is kind of important. Mercedes asked, is it appropriate for the family to provide their own translators, such as someone they trust or another family member besides the child?
I mean, I think if that person is, being chosen by the family, I mean, they trust that person. I think where, um, you know, um, yeah, I mean, I would say yes, that that is someone that that they trust. Um, I the only like feeling I have in terms of that is like that yes, that I hope the person is really like understanding language, but to that understands English, that the level of proficiency, I should say, is where it needs to be. Because I know that you know, different agencies like the hospitals, different spaces like the hospital, or like in especially when you're dealing with like law lingo and like court, I would just be real cautious of that. In that, otherwise, I'd say yes. I mean, if it's just something simple, yes. But when you're talking about that, that needs to be translated in a very specific way, I would be just a little curious, a little cautious on that. But oh yes, I see Mr. Barlow saying when it comes to court hearings, investigative process, and certified translator. Oh, a certified translator is needed. Absolutely. So I've done court translating translations in Neosho, and so you had to do an actual test to be certified. But yeah, it's um, when it's something very simple and you don't need a certified translator unless your agency is asking you to, yeah, I'd say use that person. Okay. Oh, do you see that, Liz? So James is saying many offices in our area offer language lines, but this can also create a false sense of accessibility. Yeah, because they fail to evaluate the clarity of their documents and the information being requested. There are also many barriers between the time a client walks into the door and when the language line is called. Yeah, yeah. And whenever possible, try to use a real person. All right, so we've come to our reflection in like kind of action step, okay, or steps. Um, so I want to make sure that we understand to really identify fear drivers, the power dynamics, and then trauma responses. Um, so we we want to remember like language, tone, and patience matter, especially in this times. Um, Also to remember that like systems feel safer when people do. Um, so I do want to, as we kind of wrap up, I want you to think about like, what's one change you can make in your role, in your where you're at. Um, so what is one small shift in communication, tone, or process that you could reduce fear without changing your role or responsibilities? And lastly, I would really ask that your organization, thinks about how they can better support immigrant families. Um, and I really like people to think about like that behind like every fear is a story. And the way that you respond can either deepen the fear or help it heal it. Um, I really want to thank you for like your openness and your commitment. I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and just thank you again for being here.
And thank you so much, Nidia. This was a fantastic presentation, and your comments, your questions, the discussion. We're just excited about the work that's taking place there that you're doing and that we're doing. We also want to recognize that we have in our audience, DeMarcus Thomas Brown from Columbia's Violence Prevention Department. That's an inaugural position that the city of Columbia has, and he's in charge of it. He will be coming up and presenting and doing community discussions and training with us on lunchtime in March. It's been a fantastic day. Thanks again, Liz. Kudos to you, Nidia, and thanks again for this wonderful audience. Liz, closing comments?
Yes, give me just a second. I'm grabbing the survey link. I got too many things going on. Let's see. Here we go. Copy. So if you would please, please, please take the survey. I'm going to put that in the chat now. And then I have put up the flyer for next month's lunchtime learning session, which will be February 18th with Professor Laura Chavez Moreno. Lessons from Studying, How Schools Make Race, Implications for Juvenile Justice. And she was actually referred to me from Nidia, who said she's absolutely amazing. So I was super excited to be able to get her. She's authored this book, How Schools Make Race. And so you can register. The link is on our website, stopred.org, so you can get registered to attend. Let's see. We are also looking for speakers or presenters for our MJJA Spring Educational Conference that will be in St. Louis, Missouri. So if you have any ideas, or if you yourself are interested, please, you're welcome to send information to me or to Jeff Barlow. It's just jeff@mjja.org. Um, we would love um, we would love to hear about it and get those recommendations from you.
Yeah, if you've got
Um,
a model program or a particular topic you know about or somebody that teaches it, please let us know.
Again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next month with Professor Chavez Moreno.
Thank you.
And take that survey, please.
Yeah. Great job, Miss Lopez. Fantastic.
Thank you.